just a moment.
That's Matt Johnson, number one.
First of all, can you hear me back there like this, or do I need the mic? Can you hear me?
I can
You can hear that. We hear you fine. I want to make sure everyone in the back, because I don't want you to. I'll use the mic if you can't hear me. You can hear me? Okay. I speak in 80 cities a year, so I'm usually pretty good about projecting the voice, and I feel like a dog that's leashed when I'm on a mic like that. Okay, welcome. I'm speaking on Sasquatch encounters and PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. So I'm taking a psychologist point of view to this whole Bigfoot phenomenon. I'm not going to be up here showing you foot casts. I'm not going to be up here showing you measurements. I'm taking a whole different angle on this whole phenomenon. How to treat witnesses who've had a potential traumatic encounter with the Sasquatch. But before we get started, let's see. I want to let you know a little bit more about who I am. I always think it's good to know who you're listening to, and I'll get through this really quick, but I think it offers some perspective on why I'm up here presenting. Okay? I was raised in Salem, Oregon, and I moved to Anchorage, Alaska in 1980, 31 years ago, on a basketball scholarship to the University of Alaska at Anchorage. He's up here talking about how Bobo's a big guy at 6'2" or 6'3". I'm 6'9". Okay, so I was 6'2" in the 7th grade. Okay, so to me, it's all about perspective. But keeping things in perspective, when I played college basketball against Patrick Ewing, okay, he made me look small. Okay, so 6'9" is not so big when you're playing NCAA basketball. I played against Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Clyde Drexler, Akeem Olajuwon made me look small. Okay, I was asked to play for the New Jersey Nets in the NBA, but I turned them down to go after my doctorate degree in psychology. At that time in the mid-'80s, the New Jersey Nets were the worst team in the NBA. And although I was good, I was not great, and I would have warmed the bench. And back then in the mid-'80s, bench warmers in the NBA only got paid $75,000 a year. Whoop-de-doo, that's not even $1,000 a game. It's not the minimum $1 million a year they get for warming the bench today. I would warm the bench for $1 million, but not for $75,000. So, I got my bachelor's social work degree from the University of Alaska. I got my first master's degree at Rutgers University, master of social work degree, and then my second master's degree and my doctorate degrees in psychology from George Fox University in Newberg, Oregon, just outside of Portland, Oregon. I'm a father of 4 children, ranging from the ages of 4 through 20. My 20-year-old son plays football for Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama. He's a straight-A student. He's 6'8" tall, 1 inch shorter than Daddy, but he outweighs Daddy by 60 pounds. He's 330 pounds. He could be a Sasquatch himself, and I call him Sir. My daughter is going to be a senior this year. Hannah is in Grants Pass with her mom. She is also a straight A student, probably going to be the valedictorian for her graduating class. Hannah stands 6'4" tall, and she's a kick-butt basketball and volleyball player. My 15-year-old, who's going to be a sophomore this year at Grants Pass, he's 6'7½", and he's being compared with Kyle Singler for basketball, who grew up in Medford. And the refs and the coaches who saw Kyle grow up through the ranks are saying Micah's just as good, if not better, than Kyle was by his freshman year. And then Grady, who is age 4, is just this shy of being 4 feet tall. Grady's estimated to be about 7 foot to 7'2" by the time he's done growing. Be looking for Grady in the NBA in about 18 years, and Daddy will be his agent. I wrote a book. The book is called Positive Parenting with a Plan, and I speak in 80 cities a year. I've been doing it for 10 years. You do the math, 10 years times 80 cities a year. Name the city, state, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I've spoken all over the U.S., I've spoken all over Canada, I've spoken in Europe. And so I'm slowly but surely taking over America one family at a time. And I recently moved to Puyallup, Washington. Cynthia, pretty please stand up. This is my fiancée, Cynthia. Cynthia and I went to high school together 31 years ago. We met at our 30th high school reunion. And we didn't know each other very well then, but we know each other a whole lot better now, enough to motivate me to move to Puyallup 1 month ago. So anyway, I have a foot in Grants Pass, Oregon still, and I have a foot in Puyallup, and so now I have 2 areas to research. Okay, so my encounter at the Oregon Caves, July 1st, 2000. Keep in mind that I was a resident of Alaska for 20 years, been out fishing all over the place, hiking, camping, all kinds of outdoor experience. I've been chased by a grizzly bear. I've pet a moose sticking its head in my house in Anchorage, feeding it carrots and celery. I'm not afraid of animals. I'm not afraid of being in the outdoors. I moved my family down from Alaska in December of 1999. 6 months later, we're up at the Oregon Caves taking a tour of the caves. And so we take the tour, and then after we're done, we eat lunch out there in the parking lot. We brought a cooler, and then we decide to hike the Big Tree Loop Trail. Now, the Big Tree Loop Trail is a 3.5-mile trail that goes all the way around the mountainside. Now, most people hike up. We found this out, by the way, after our encounter. Not before the encounter, after the encounter. Most people, prior to our encounter, hike up the left side of the Big Tree Loop Trail and see the big tree and then come back down the left side. Okay, because why would you hike all this way to go see the big tree if all you have to do is hike up here and come back down? Okay, so most people take the easy way. So we lived in Alaska. We hiked for miles and miles and miles. So no big deal for us, no big deal for our kids. And at that time the kids were 9, 7, and 5. So we were hiking the Big Tree Loop Trail. And we were up in about this area here when we smelled something downwind, very putrid. And we walked through about a 50-foot area where, and keep in mind, so you're on a slope and there's trees and there's brush and it's thick vegetation and you can't see anything, but you can smell something like a big old garbage bin has been dumped and it's blowing downwind, and we're walking through it and we're smelling this, but no big deal. And we keep walking the trail, and then eventually we get to the point where we're walking through this area and something is paralleling us. And we can hear when we're walking this really deep bass, guttural, huge lungs. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And we're like, what the heck is that? And having lived in Alaska, we couldn't Alaska, okay?
Matthew Johnson, you're true.
We weren't in Alaska, so that means it wasn't a grizzly bear, okay? So we knew we were okay because we knew animals in Oregon, worst it could get was a cougar or a black bear, and what we were hearing we knew was not a cougar, and it wasn't a black bear, but so we were okay. We were just curious, but not scared. So we keep walking, and we eventually get to a point where we're not hearing anything, we're not smelling anything, and my kids take a break on the trail. So they're squatting down on the trail, and they have a stick, and they're playing with the bug on the trail. And you need to keep in mind, okay, I'm going to look at it from your perspective. So the mountainside is sloping down like this, okay? And the trail is cutting through the mountain, okay? And so they're stopped on the trail. They're poking a stick in the ground at this bug. My ex-wife is standing here looking at the kids, okay? And I have to go to the bathroom. Mother Nature is knocking on my door. So I hike up off the trail through brush and trees, because I'm not going to do it right there in front of everybody. So I hike up here, and I do my thing, number 1 and number 2. And so I'm up here doing my thing. They're down here, and now I'm up here, and the trail's here, so I'm looking down this way when I'm pulling up my pants, and I'm looking down that way, trying to see if I can see whatever it was that was following us. Okay, and so I'm looking from my right to my left, and all of a sudden I see some movement out of the left corner of my eye, and I'm looking down the slope. Okay? And all of a sudden I see movement, and I look, and that's when I saw Bigfoot, in my mind, walk off the pages of myth and legend into reality. And I freaked. I had no cognitive schema for this thing to hang on in my mind what I saw. And I saw it walk 1001, 1002, and it went behind this really big, wide tree. And then I saw it kind of poke out from behind that big, wide tree, and it was looking over the top of this new growth tree, this younger tree growing right next to this big tree. And it was watching my ex-wife and my kids down on the trail. So now we got a triangle thing going on here. They're down there. This animal is down here. I'm up here behind a natural blind where it can't see me, and its focus is on here, not on me, which allowed me to be able to see this animal. And I can literally feel my brain trying to, go through data of boop, 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 what is this? Boop, 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 what is it? Boop, 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 what is this? And nothing's there. And then I can literally feel it crash. And this whole thing is surreal, and it's like those slow-mo movies. And then my brain reboots, and I have this protective instinct that kicks in. And the only thing that I know what I need to do is protect my family. I don't know what this animal is capable of doing. All I know is I have a wife and I have 3 kids down there, and I need to get them out of there. So the only thing that I have to go on is, what do you do with a grizzly bear in Alaska? That's it. And I know I'm going to get this animal's attention, but I'm going to avoid eye contact, because if you do the eye contact thing with the grizzly bear, it's going to take it as a challenge. So I run straight down through the brush toward this tree, toward the trail, to get its attention, but I'm avoiding eye contact. I hit the trail, I turn left, I run up to my ex and the 3 kids, and I go, let's go up the trail now, move. And they're looking at me like, what's your problem? And I'm going, now, go! And they're like, okay. So I move them up the trail, and we go farther up the trail, around the switchback. We come up here, around the switchback. There's nothing following us. We're not smelling, hearing, seeing anything. I sit the kids down on a log, give them some water, pull my ex aside, and say, "You're not going to believe what I saw." And she said, "What?" And I said, "I saw Bigfoot." And she said, "I believe you." And the reason why she believed me, she smelled it, she heard it, and we had a game plan. I said, we're gonna finish the trail. We're not, again, what do you do with the grizzly bear? If you go through a grizzly bear's territory, you don't go back through the grizzly bear's territory. You go around the grizzly bear's territory. So I said, we are going to finish this trail, and you and the kids are going to go about 75 to 100 feet ahead of me on this trail, which will put me back in this area in case something comes up through here. And if something does come up through here, I'm going to run interference. And if something does come up, you run, you don't stop, you don't look back. And what I saw, if I ran interference, it wouldn't be a whole lot of interference because I'm almost 7 feet tall. And what I saw was just about 9 feet tall and made me look very, very small. And so we managed to get all the way down back to the area of the gift shop. And then we went inside, and well, we sat outside on the bench. We sent the kids inside because we told them if you were good hikers, if you didn't complain, you can go get a gift. So they went inside. And we talked about, do we report or don't we report? Do we report or don't we report? And we decided if we saw a black bear up there, we would report. Public safety. If we saw a cougar up there, we would report. Public safety. And I saw the animal, we all smelled it, we all heard it, I saw the animal, we're going to report. So I reported. I also knew from a psychologist perspective that I wasn't going to not talk about this. I know from a psychologist perspective that when people experience trauma in their life, things that shake up their life, whether it's physical abuse as a child, sexual abuse as a child, or you're dealing with a Vietnam vet who went through war, or in, the Gulf War, now Iraq, Afghanistan, and dealing with vets that come back from that if you don't talk about that stuff and you bottle it all up, it's not going to be pretty. And I knew this as a psychologist, so I refused to bottle it up. And so I started talking about it. And the kids had no clue what was going on. My ex and I kept it from the kids. We just moved them along the trail. And so I went in and I reported it to the ranger. And it was Beth, and I'm forgetting her last name, but she was, and this was 11 years ago. And she's probably about 5'2". I walk in there, and she's in her ranger uniform in the park headquarters, and the first thing I asked her, because I was really just overwhelmed and I didn't want anyone else to hear, so I asked her, "Are we alone?" Well, she's looking up at this guy who's almost 2 feet taller than her, and I'm going, "Stupid question, Matt, dumb question." I pull out my wallet, I give her my business card. "I'm Dr. Johnson, I'm a psychologist, I need to make a report." And I could see her go, "Oh, okay, this guy's not a psycho murderer." Okay, so I sit down, and then I start shaking, and I start crying, and she's looking at me, and I start telling her my story. And I got to the point where I said I saw it. She told me later on she thought I was going to tell her I saw it, I found a dead body up there in the woods. That's what she thought I was going to tell her. And then I tell her I saw Bigfoot. And she looks at me, and I'm expecting her to drop her jaw and roll her eyes and, "You idiot." And she immediately responded to me by saying, "Dr. Johnson, we're finding new animals on our planet all the time, and if we think corroborated you know, the smell, the sound, and everything else. And so we're driving home that night from the park, and the kids are going, "What's going on?" And my ex goes, "Oh, nothing big. Daddy just saw Bigfoot." What? Bigfoot? What's Bigfoot? And so started talking about it, and so we get the kids home, we tuck them in bed, and I'm wired, you know, and I've got to type up this story now. So the story you see on the BFRO website was typed up that night in my office. I leave my home, I go to my office, I type up the story. I go online to the internet and Google Bigfoot because, you know, I was not into Bigfoot, and I start finding these sites, and there's the BFRO, submit a story, boom, submitted the story. The next day, the park calls up, "How are you guys doing? Are you okay? Is there anything we can do for you?" "We're fine, thank you very much. We'd like to have you come back out, walk us through what happened, where you smelled it, where you saw it." And I said, "Hell no." "We'd like you to come out. We'd like you to bring your family. We have a lot of questions we need." And I'm not bringing my family out there. I said, "Unless you're packing guns." And they said, "This is a national park. We cannot carry firearms in the national park. And there's a large group of people, and we're going to have 2 investigators from the BFRO, and we'll be okay. You know, and one of them is John Freitas. Can I have him call you?" I said, "Okay, have John call me." So John calls me, and John interviews me, and John says, "Well, I'm going to be out there too, so are you going to bring your family?" And I said, "Yes, I will." And he said, "Dr. Johnson, don't tell the Rangers this, but I'll be packing a gun, just so you can feel better." I said, "Okay." So we went out there. We were all scared. And so we walked him through where we smelled it, where we saw it. John Roth is a park ranger there, and he had us stand up on the trail, and he specializes in tracking, and he went down and checked out the area for about a half hour, came back up and said, "Something very large to move through this area, and this is all fresh stuff." And he said, "I want you guys to come down here and look at something." So we all went down there. And he said, "I found this animal trail that is paralleling the trail that you guys were walking on." And he says, "Look at this." We walked down about 100 feet, and smack dab in the trail was this huge human-like footprint that dwarfed my size 16 shoe. And he said, "This is not a bear track." He said, "This is a Sasquatch track." And then he looked up at us, because he's down on the ground pointing it out, and the toes and everything. He looks up at us and he goes, "I want to let you know that the park has a policy where we will not take a public position on the existence of Bigfoot within the boundaries of our park."
It can exist elsewhere, but not there.
I'm standing there and I'm thinking, you just told me you have a policy in this park where you're not going to take a public position with the media about Sasquatch. Well, how do you develop a policy unless you have a bunch of people sitting around talking about developing a policy? And why would you develop a policy unless you had something that happened to motivate you to create a policy? Well, within that month, I got like emails up the yin-yang and at least 25 phone calls from people that lived around the park, worked in the park, mined near the park, telling me stories about direct encounters or indirect encounters that span back over 30 years in that park, and around that park. And I'll tell you more about what happened, but now the psychologist perspective and how to treat a Bigfoot witness. There were some people that did a great job dealing with me with my encounter, and there were some people out there that did a piss poor job. And they called themselves Bigfoot investigators. And they were horrible. Post-traumatic stress disorder. We've all heard about PTSD with the Vietnam War. Post-traumatic stress disorder, the invisible wounds of war. PTSD, don't leave NAM without it. A lot of soldiers returned from Vietnam with PTSD. And what didn't help those soldiers back then, after that war, is when they came back home from the traumas of war and got spit on, and tomatoes thrown at them, and called baby killers. So they came home from trauma, the trauma of war, and received the trauma of being disdained by their own society. Double trauma. I am so happy with the way our country, regardless of our political position on the war, which is irrelevant, that regardless of the political position, no one is treating our soldiers when they come home from Afghanistan and Iraq the way they treated those soldiers, which was horrible. But post-traumatic stress disorder. What are the symptoms of PTSD? Not all wounds are visible. Upsetting thoughts and memories about the trauma. For a witness with a Bigfoot encounter, and keeping in mind, we're not talking from a researcher's perspective. When you're a Bigfoot researcher, you know the animal exists. You're going out there to look for the animal. You're going out there hoping and praying to see the animal, interact with the animal, learn more about the animal. You are psychologically prepared for the encounter. But when we're talking about people who don't know about the existence, weren't planning on having an encounter, it's trauma. You don't even know this thing exists, and then there it is. That is a shock to the brain. That is psychological trauma. So they may have upsetting thoughts or memories about the trauma. They may have frequent nightmares about the trauma for 3 months after my encounter. 3 months, every night. I had nightmares every night for 3 months. I had nightmares about this animal coming up from behind the tree and tearing my ex-wife and my kids apart right in front of my face, and I could do nothing about it for 3 months. Flashbacks about the situation that created the trauma. Strong feelings of distress when reminded. When incidents occur like war, 9/11, rape, child abuse, or a Bigfoot encounter, when something that is out of the ordinary shocks the system, it deeply embeds itself within the brain. Okay? And it becomes a part of the autonomic response. And so it doesn't matter how much you can process this cognitively, how much you understand it, it's deeper than that. It becomes a part of the brain. It is like something being branded on the brain. So it doesn't matter how much you process it, it's there for life. It is there. And that's why I've been doing 11 years of research since this encounter, and I know a whole lot more now than I ever knew then. But even with all the interactions that I've had, everything I've learned, and I'm still learning a whole lot more, and I've been out there with them growling and screaming and tossing pine cones into campfires, and even last year being poked through the tent while I'm sleeping, being poked in my shoulder. Okay, poke, pull back, poke, pull back, third poke, reach across my chest, grab the finger through the tent wall, hold on to the finger, which feels like a thick cigar. And then I'm thinking, Matt, bend it because it could be a stick, and I bend it and it's jointed. And I'm holding on to this finger, and then after about 10 seconds, it starts gently pulling it back. And then about a minute later, it starts poking my feet through the front of the tent. And the next morning, there are tracks by the side where it was poking me in the shoulder and at the front where it was poking me in the feet. And even though I know they're not going to harm us, because it could have just as easily taken a big old stick and beat us to death through the tent, I'd be dead a dozen times over. That's my point. I know this. But even though I know this through 11 years of research, whenever I talk about my initial encounter, there's something ingrained and branded deep in my brain that I cannot change. Cannot change. And the physical response, there's a physical response when they're reminded. I don't know, last night, if you were here listening to Jeff give his little talk, the police officer, the attorney, did you see his mic? Did you hear his mic shake? Okay, that's the physiological response. Did you hear my questions to him? Okay, PTSD related. He was a walking poster child for PTSD, and I'm not even sure if he realizes it. He's obviously an educated man. He's an attorney. He's a police officer. He was a sergeant in the military, but he didn't even realize he was doing this PTSD thing. And that's why I was asking these questions. And he was honest enough to share that his marriage went belly up 2 years later after the encounter, which often happens for people who have PTSD issues. My marriage went belly up 2 years later. Now there's a lot of other variables that contributed to that marriage going belly up, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And that happens with people with PTSD. They try to avoid thoughts and feelings about the situation, okay? And I really respect and admire Jeff, but he was doing the whole, I'm a retired sergeant in the military, I'm a trained police officer. In other words, I've been trained to compartmentalize this. I've been trained to put this in a little box and stick it over here on the shelf, okay? I've been trained to avoid my thoughts and feelings about this. Well, you can think that you can avoid it, but I'm telling you as a psychologist, as much as you think you can compartmentalize it, put it in a box and set it over on the shelf, I guarantee you, no, you can't. You may think you can, no, you can't. That's why I'm in business as a psychologist. No, you can't. Now, other symptoms. I don't know if the battery just went belly up or if we lost the cord. Huh? Where's Toby? Toby, you said you have more batteries, right? I think triple A's, 2 triple A's. Hit the button, hit the space bar. Is the computer frozen up?
Oh, no, here it goes.
Okay, now hit the back arrow, the arrow, again. So it's the computer that we're having a problem with?
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, can you pop those out? Did we lose some stuff on the screen? Can you turn the screen so I can see it?
I'm trying to get this back.
So back arrow. Okay.
But
That's
every
it?
time I try and go forward, it's
It's
skipping
not
to the
going to do
next
it.
slide.
Okay. Okay, well then we'll just skip to the next slide. Thank you. Could be a battery issue, might be the computer freezing up issue. Okay, so go ahead and skip to the next slide. Okay, let me try the button. Pull that wire receiver out and put it back in, please. Okay, there we go. Okay, treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. One approach to treatment is cognitive therapy. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I know you're not mental health professionals. I know there's more other things you're interested in related to the Bigfoot phenomenon. But the bottom line is, if you're sitting here involved in Bigfoot research and you happen to be a Bigfoot investigator, then you better be listening to me. Because we don't know everything, which was stated up here earlier. And if you're a Bigfoot investigator, you're probably not a psychologist. You probably don't work in the mental health field. You probably don't understand human psychology. And you do need to know this if you're dealing with people being a Bigfoot investigator. If you're dealing with a witness that never knew anything about Bigfoot, was not going out there looking for Bigfoot, ran into Bigfoot, the odds go up that they might be experiencing PTSD. So you're not just out there investigating and gathering data. You have a human and moral obligation to make sure that this person gets the help they need to get if they're having problems. Okay? So you're not just out there collecting data. You're dealing with a living, breathing human being that has needs in front of your face, and you will treat them with that respect. Okay, so they may need cognitive therapy. In other words, dealing with the thoughts, processing their thoughts about this. Exposure therapy. That's why I got into research. Okay, I knew for me, I needed, in having 20 years of residency in Alaska, being in the outdoors, I knew I was either going to shut down and never go back out into the woods again, or I was going to get back out there, get back up on that horse, and keep riding. And I chose to get back out there in the woods and expose myself to this new phenomenon that just walked off the pages of myth and legend into my life. Acceptance therapy is dealing with the feelings. Psychodynamic therapy is dealing with how unresolved issues from the past might be interfering with your ability to accept what just happened now in the present. What was funny is I started getting these people sending me emails and calling me on the phone who had their own encounters, who were having PTSD issues. And the funniest story that stands out to me was this lady in therapy in Washington whose therapist was telling her, you didn't really see Bigfoot. There is no such thing as Bigfoot. What we're dealing with here is Bigfoot is a symbolic representation in your mind that represents the fear that you have from the abuse that you suffered when you were a child. And so we need to confront this symbolic representation in your mind. And they battled over this in therapy sessions for a year. And then this lady hears about my story, and I'm a psychologist, so she goes into her counselor's office, walks over to her computer, pulls up my story on the internet and says, read this. The therapist reads it, turns around, looks at her and said, I guess you did see Bigfoot. The counselor had difficulty accepting that. Treat with respect. Now, I chose to face my traumas and fears. I chose to make a report. I told my story over and over and over again and again and again because, as I told you earlier, not to talk about trauma, not to talk about things that are a shock to the system is not a healthy way to deal with the trauma. I was all over the media. I was interviewed on the early show with Jane Clayson. Fortunately, Bryant Gumbel was home with the flu that morning, so I didn't have to deal with Bryant Gumbel. And what was really obvious to me looking back, because I was getting phone calls from radio stations and TV shows and they always have their little grunts call you up ahead of time to try to set stuff up. And so this girl calls me up and she says, we want to get you on the early show. Well, I'm thinking this is a local Medford news thing, right? And because I don't watch morning TV. And so, anyway, she said, we want you on for 2 minutes. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to do it. And she said, why not? And I said, well, I need at least 4 or 5 minutes to tell my story. 2 minutes isn't going to be long enough. And she said, well, let me talk with the producer and get back to you. So she got back to me 2 hours later and she said, okay, we'll give you 4 minutes, but we can't do it tomorrow on Friday. We're going to have to get you on Monday because we have a 4-minute chunk of time we can give you on Monday, but we can't do it on Friday. But you need to promise us that if Good Morning America and one of the other morning TV shows gets a hold of you, we get first shot. And I go, who is this? Because I'm thinking it's a Medford TV station. And she said, hello, the early show, New York City? What? So you go, okay. So anyway, I'm being interviewed Monday morning on this program. And as I'm being asked these questions, it's very clear to me the way she starts off, kind of disrespectful, that she doesn't realize, do your friends think I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a doctor of psychology. I'm a Christian, and they know I wouldn't lie to them. And I could watching the show later on, I could see her kind of do this shock thing, like, who was the idiot that didn't tell me who I was interviewing here? You know, then all of a sudden it went from a 4-minute interview to a 10-minute interview. Okay? And so, you know, I was on Coast to Coast AM twice, Animal Planet, ESPN2, the Travel Channel, Sci-Fi, BBC, all kinds of programs, over 300 radio interviews, including Stephen Fry in his video documentary, Stephen Fry in America. Do you know who Stephen Fry is? You have that copy? You don't know. Stephen Fry is a comedian and actor in England, and he was almost born in America. His father almost took a teaching position at Princeton University in New Jersey. So that kind of got Stephen thinking about, well, what would have happened if I was born in America? How different would my life be? So then he decided he was going to put together a documentary about traveling around America and dealing with regular Joe Schmo American citizens and getting stuff about their various states. So he interviewed people from all walks of life, including Morgan Freeman, including Steve Jobs, the head of Apple, and all kinds of people. So it's an interesting overview of our country, but I got interviewed in there on my encounter with Bigfoot. I decided to become a Bigfoot researcher, get back up on the horse, get back out there. I love being in the woods anyway. And so I met Dr. York, Dr. Bill York, back in 2000. I didn't realize this. He had an office right next to mine in Grants Pass. Dr. York was a British gentleman. He spent 40 years. He rebelled against his parents, ran off to Africa at age 17, okay? Spent 40 years in Africa being a big game hunter, officer for a wildlife refuge, a primate specialist, and then he moved back to the States, and he decided to dabble in loans for private people who wanted to buy a house. That's how he was investing in his future. And his office was right next door to mine. I didn't know this, but after my encounter, he took me out to lunch. We talked and talked and talked, and he said, we need to get an expedition together. So we put together an expedition. We had about 15 guys. We went back up on the mountain above the park boundaries, south toward Mount Elijah. We spent 2 nights up there. We covered all sides of the mountain and down into the valley, including the Bigelow Lakes area. That night we had them visit our camp. My father is a retired state trooper. We were all exhausted from going up and down the mountainsides looking for evidence. We found all kinds of tracks. We found 3 bedding areas. We found a squatting area where they had sunned themselves on the ridge, probably that morning as we were hiking up, okay? Found all kinds of evidence. They approached us that night when we were all sleeping in our tents, and my father, the retired Oregon State Trooper, was up guarding camp and saw them come toward camp. Okay? So anyway, I started the Southern Oregon Bigfoot Society. Your best friends are SOBs. And anyway, Dr. York, he said, I came up here on the expedition as a skeptic, but with all the evidence I saw, and based on his experience with primates in Africa, he said, these animals are real. He said, I'm leaving a believer. And so I shared we found all kinds of evidence. Now, how others treated me. Now we're going to get into the Bigfoot investigation aspect of the whole Bigfoot phenomenon. Dealing with witnesses with possible PTSD issues related to encountering something that they never knew existed, never expected to exist, and they're human beings with psychological responses. Now, met moneymaker. I had breakfast with him once with my family and dinner with him once. Nice guy, good sense of humor. Took me under his wing. Provided me with a whole lot of information and education because I knew nothing. I was on the phone with him every other day. Email exchanges went on for months and months and months. Okay? Media would contact me. He'd say, have them contact him. So I was kind of funneling stuff his way. Okay? He also warned me to who to avoid in the Bigfoot field. The kooks, the mean people. Okay? And for those of you who don't know this, and there are those out there right now who do know this, unfortunately, there's a whole lot of politics out there. There are people who are really good-natured, who are wonderful, friendly people, and then there are people out there who are just downright nasty and mean. But you'll find that in all walks of life. But you also find that in the Bigfoot field. And unfortunately, those people are interviewing witnesses, dealing with people with trauma. So anyway, Matt treated me really, really well. And then I kind of parted ways with him over time. Okay? One of the things that stood out to me like a sore thumb was this issue. How many of you have seen Owen Pate's Memorial Day video? Have you seen that? Have you seen on TV Sasquatch Legend Meets Science? And this is the big anchor on that TV program, right? Okay, well now, Paul Harvey's the rest of the story. This is what you don't know. I was being contacted by all kinds of media, all kinds of people. My phone was constantly ringing off the hook at my office, and 80 to 90% of the time it wasn't clients, it was Bigfooters, people who've had encounters in the media. Owen Pate gets a hold of me, and Owen says, I got this video that I took, and I want you to see it. Can I send you a copy? So I said, okay, send me a copy. So he sends me the copy. Well, I get to see the copy, and the copy has all the way from the people in the camp, and then all of us, and they're drinking and ha, and drunk off their butts, and then all of a sudden, oh, look, down here, there's somebody in the trees, and then they're going up the hillside. And now look, oh, they're running across the mountain. And when you're watching it, it looks staged as hell. You know, let's look at the direction. Oh, look, there's somebody there. Oh, look, they're going up the hillside. Oh, look, they're running across the hillside. And oh, look, it looks like a human being in a suit running like a human. Okay, I'm just telling you, that's what it looks like to me. It does not look like a Sasquatch running. And when they go and do the reenactments, doesn't run any faster than a human being. I'm just saying. Okay, so I call up Matt and I say, Matt, I got this Owen Pate guy. He's got this video. I've seen this video. I want to get the video. And he goes, Matt Moneymaker's response to me, Owen Pate, he's a kook. Blow him off, ignore him, he's a kook. And he's been trying to pass that video off for the last 5 years. It's a bunch of crap. That's almost an exact quote. So I go, okay, I'll blow it off and go on with life. And then a couple of years later, I'm watching Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, the BFRO, and what's their anchor for that program on TV? The very video that he told me the guy was a kook, and it's a bunch of crap, and now all of a sudden it's the next best thing to the Patterson-Gimlin film. So now I'm going, okay, why did you treat me that way? Why did you treat Owen that way? Why did you talk smack to me about Owen? Who are you talking smack to out there about me? Do you see what I'm getting at? The way he was treating me as a witness, the way he was treating Owen was inappropriate. Okay? Now, I've met a lot of people I used to be with the BFRO. Okay? Well, if you start hearing I used to be, and you run into all kind of I used to be's, then that's saying something about what used to be. I'm just saying. Okay? So there's politics, there's inappropriate stuff going on out there in Bigfootdom. And he started off treating me very nice, ended not treating me very nice. He did warn me about this guy, however. He said, stay away from this guy, he's Looney Tunes. Okay? Eric Beckjord. Okay? Who's passed away, but that doesn't mean these facts didn't happen. And I'm sorry, I know he's passed away, but this 25 to 50 times. My secretary was getting hacked off big time. He would email me 25 to 50 times a day, totally harassing me. He did not want me to have any media attention. He said, have them call me, you know diddly squat, I know everything, have the media talk to me. Bottom line is, he was jealous. There were a lot of people out there who've dedicated their lives to the whole Bigfoot phenomenon and research, and it pissed them off that this psychologist who never did a day of research, who got lucky enough to run into an animal, okay, and all of a sudden everyone's focused on this psychologist. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for this to happen. It happened. And these people are pissed at me because they're not getting the attention. Well, he's Looney Tunes and he's really pissed. Calling me 25 to 50 times a day, emailing me 25 to 50 times a day, leaving insulting statements on listservs, on his website, my website, and other websites, totally off the wall and inappropriate. You don't treat people that way. And then, you know, there's ridiculous questions and accusations from investigators, or just the Monday morning quarterbacking people out there, okay? So, I had this person call me up over the phone to interview me. Some of you know who this is. I'm not going to say who it is. I'm just saying she's a self-proclaimed, well-known Bigfoot investigator. Okay? So I'm being kind. I talk to anyone and everyone that wants to show me interest. And then she asked me this question. Was it fuzzy or did it have hair? What? So I'm on the phone. I'm totally silent and I'm thinking this one through. Was it fuzzy or did it have hair? Fuzz's hair. What the hell are you asking me? Was it fuzzy or did it have hair? Have you stopped beating your wife?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you say yes, that means you used to beat your wife. And if you say no because you don't beat your wife, well, that means you haven't stopped beating your wife. So either way you ask that question or answer it, you're screwed. Was it fuzzy or did it have hair? And because I hesitated and thought about this and thought about it and thought about it, she started telling everybody, I didn't see a Sasquatch. He never saw a Sasquatch. He didn't know if it had fuzz or hair. And it was like, you idiot. What are you doing? Never mind the fact that we had all kinds of research. We had the ranger who found the track in the park who said they weren't going to take a position. Never mind the fact we took 15 guys up there a few weeks after the encounter, found 3 bedding areas, sunspots. They approached us that night. Now, don't mind all that stuff because I couldn't answer this ridiculous question. I didn't see it. It's crazy. Some people accuse me of trying to drum up business. He never saw a Sasquatch. He's just saying he did so he could get this attention and drum up business. Now, that's a brilliant marketing strategy, right? Come see me, I'm a psychologist and I saw a Bigfoot. Okay? That's going to bring a whole lot of people into my office. But that's about as brilliant as these people are that try to treat you that way. Somebody, wasn't me, somebody within a matter of weeks started selling Bigfoot t-shirts at the gift store at the Oregon Caves. Right away, I was accused of being behind that. Now, for the record, Toby, how much money are you paying me here to speak?
Well, you asked for 0, and I've given you 0.
Okay, yeah. Every media, I've had TV programs that say we'll pay you $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. I haven't taken a penny. Radio programs that'll pay 100, $200, $300 to get me on the radio program, I have turned it down every time. They've sent me contracts with money amounts in it. I draw a line through it, not taking a penny, sign it, send it back to them. I have not profited 1 penny off this whole thing, and I will not. Because the moment I start taking money for it, is the moment I believe my credibility starts going down the toilet. And then I had people shooting all over me. Okay?
That's a good one.
He should have done this, he should have done that. You know, why didn't you take pictures? You were up. Yeah, oh yeah, I should have just walked down through the brush, over, grabbed the camera out of the backpack, said, stand here for a moment, Daddy's going to go around the tree and take pictures of Sasquatch. You should have. You know,
going to take care of your business, that's exactly what you want to take pictures of, right?
yeah, exactly. I should have had the camera up there. Okay, this is number 2, this is number 1. I mean, people don't think through how they treat the witness. It's crazy. But I was also encouraged. I was encouraged by Dr. Bill York. I was also encouraged by the Grants Pass Rotary Club that I was a member of. They always wanted to hear my Bigfoot updates, so I had lots of community support and encouragement. I was at the Oregon Psychological Association, 300 psychologists meeting for CEUs for a couple days of training. The president of the OPA said, Dr. Johnson, will you please stand up? You know, so I stand up and he goes, I had no idea what he was going to do. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the psychologist who had an encounter with Bigfoot and was brave enough to tell the world. And I was standing there. I had a judge in Portland, Oregon call me up and share with me about his Bigfoot encounter in the Mount Hood area. I said, dude, go public with it. I'm a psychologist. You're a judge. Go public with it. The more professionals who go public, this will be a good thing. And he goes, are you kidding? I'll lose my position on the bench if I go public. I'm just calling you up to let you know you're not alone. And I'm proud of you for speaking up. I had a trooper out of Roseburg who had his hunting experience. And I said, go public. And he said, I'm 2 years from retirement. I'm not going public. I had a Smithsonian employee who had a mutual friend in Eugene. He traveled all the way out because he heard from my friend that he knew me. So he came out to see his friend, and then his friend drove him down to Grants Pass. We went out to lunch, and he wanted to hear my story and meet me face to face. And then he said, my job at the Smithsonian Institute is to photograph everything we have in storage. And he says, we have warehouses and warehouses and warehouses of stuff. And he says, I'll be doing this until I retire. And he says, I'm not allowed to tell you things other than just in general. I have taken pictures of things that we have in the Smithsonian warehouses that you would find very encouraging. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Wow. Senator Ron Wyden was at one of our Grants Pass Rotary Clubs when I was sharing about my Bigfoot research, and when I ended with saying, and once we prove the existence of this animal, I doubt the United States Congress will be prepared for the ramifications. Okay? So then I'm done. Senator Ron Wyden gives his 15-minute speech to the Rotary Club. He's done talking, and there's probably about 200 Rotarians in this room, sitting around tables, listening to him. He turns and looks across the room, looks right at me and says, and Dr. Johnson, when the Southern Oregon Bigfoot Society discovers this animal as an official existing species, I can assure you that the United States Congress will be fully prepared for the ramifications. Okay. Everyone looked at him like, what did you just say? Emails, phone calls, all kinds of support. Even Dan Aykroyd emailed me for months and months and months, very supportive. Big Bigfoot believer right there. There are no two snowflakes alike. Just like there are no two snowflakes alike, there are no two witnesses alike. You cannot go out there as a Bigfoot investigator thinking you know it all and thinking that everything you hear should always be the same. There's no two snowflakes alike. There are no two encounters alike. Everything's different. When you interview the witness, you interview them with respect, no ridicule, no trick questions, no leading questions. Did it have a pointy nose or a flat nose? Did it have hair or was it fuzzy? You don't ask trick questions, you don't ask leading questions. You say, please tell me about your experience. And what else happened? What did you see next? Then what did you do? What did you notice about the animal? What were you feeling at that time? What questions? You don't ask trick questions. And look around you. Do you see two human beings that look the same? Do you see some human beings that have more protruding noses and others that might have more flat noses? Do you think all Bigfoot species have to have flat noses? Do you think they all have really pointy heads? I mean, come on. Do all the dogs look alike? Seriously. Yet there are Bigfoot investigators out there who have their understanding of what they think a Bigfoot looks like, how it always behaves, and then they take that and they impose it upon every witness, and if what you're telling me doesn't fit what I believe to be true, then you did not see that animal. You are a hoaxer. And that is wrong. That's not how you go into an interview. You don't go in with your mind made up. You don't go in asking trick questions and leading questions. You go in asking open-ended questions. And you suck as much out of them as you can. Now, questions were being asked last night to Jeff about details. You want to know something? Here's what most investigators don't know about human psychology when you're going through post-traumatic stress disorder. Memory's impaired. And you don't get to interpret that memory impairment as if, see, they don't know all the details because they're making this up. No, they don't know all the details because they're going through a trauma and their memory is impaired. Do you get that? And what you usually remember in these kind of traumatic encounters is the general shape, the large features, not the small, fine details. Memory impairment, post-traumatic stress disorder, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't, because they can't give you specific small details and fine features of this animal, doesn't mean they didn't see the animal. You assess for facts, you ask open-ended questions, and then you assess later on after the interview's done and you're gone and you've taken all your notes and you've recorded. Then you assess for factual consistencies for what you know to be true about the animal. Keeping in mind that just as there are no two humans alike, there are no two Sasquatch alike. You also assess for emotional and physiological responses. You know, is this a researcher that I'm investigating who knows about them, understands them, and now they're telling me about it? Or is this a newbie that had no idea they ever existed? Therefore, the odds of them going through post-traumatic stress disorder are high. So how emotional are they when they're telling you about this? What kind of physiological stuff's going on? Is Jeff's mic doing this while he's telling you about his departure from this animal years later? PTSD. Assess for corroborating witnesses and evidence. You know, this woman says, because I hesitated about was it fuzzy or hairy, I didn't see the animal. Never mind the fact that the ranger said that he saw a track and it was a Sasquatch track. Never mind the fact that a couple weeks later, 15 guys went up there and we found 3 bedding areas, sunning areas, and tracks all over the place. We need to maintain professional when we're interviewing these witnesses. Always treat the witness with respect and professionalism, even if you think it's a hoax. That's probably not a Sasquatch track. But you still behave in a respectful and professional manner. You walk away and you make your assessment. No exploitation. Don't exploit the witnesses for personal gain. There are people out there who tried to exploit me. They knew the media was coming my way. They knew the media was very interested in me. They weren't interested in me. They were interested in, these investigators weren't interested in me as a human being or my experience. They were interested in me funneling all the media attention their way. Don't exploit the witness. Keep Bigfoot politics out of the interview process. There are different camps out there, and if this certain camp interviews the witness, then they're credible, but if they're not a part of our camp, then they're not credible. Just because they weren't interviewed by your political camp does not make them or not make them a credible witness. Leave the politics out of it. Bigfoot politics damage our credibility. Let's not talk about war in the Situation Room. Let's make peace. And now I'm up here as a witness and as a researcher for the past 11 years, and I am begging you who have an influence out there in Bigfootdom, stop the war. Stop the politics. Okay? Stop the war, stop the politics. If we are going to get anywhere with helping to identify this species and protecting its habitat and public education, we are not going to achieve the ground we need to achieve if we're going at each other's throats. Government cover-up. We saw what happened here, didn't we? Now, this is just my thought. This is not a fact. I'm not saying this is a fact. I'm saying this is my thought. And unlike Jeff last night, I'm going to share my opinion with you. Okay? When we identified this bird as an endangered species, it locked up a whole lot of land, put a whole lot of people out of work. Shut down logging companies, shut down mills, shut down towns. Okay? And here we are 20 years later dealing with the economic devastation in Northern California, Oregon, and Washington as a result of this bird going on the endangered species list, right? So can you imagine what would happen to our country if this animal got identified as officially existing and went on the endangered species list? Do you know how much land that would lock up? Not just in the Pacific Northwest, but all over the United States of America. We would have some serious economic devastation. Is the government financially motivated to keep this hush-hush? I think they are, but that's just my opinion. I can't say that's a fact. This is my contact information. If you want to get a hold of me, I'll leave it up there. We have a 15-minute break. I have just 2 or 3 minutes left, according to Toby with his hand saying I have this much time left. So, do we have any questions? There's one hand here and then one there. Go ahead.
Mine's more a comment geared towards what they would supposedly lose by the habitation, protecting habitation. Now, all this land has been vacant without
Correct.
not what we're doing.
Correct.
So, it's just a matter of monitoring and being conscious of their existence rather than stopping people surviving too.
I agree, but what you need to keep in mind is in 200 short years, we've gone from little colonies on the East Coast
Yeah, I understand that.
to all the way across with highways and large urban
Most
environments.
species have made it, though.
And what are we going to do in the next 200 years?
Exactly.
So,
That's what I'm saying is being conscious.
yeah,
Maybe
well,
that
I'm-
would help it better.
I think there's middle ground. We have one last question, and then I'm around the rest of the day. If you want to come up and pick my brain, I'm a laid-back, friendly guy. I won't bite. Okay? One last question.
Since you presumably know that they are not monsters today, had you known that prior to your first experience, you think that you would have the same psychological reaction?
No. See, that's what I'm saying. I go out there now, and they growl at us, scream at us. I had a couple from Britain that came out, and we went out all night sitting in our chairs on this logging road. We heard one over here, and one over there for hours, right? Off and on, wood knocking, growling, and stuff. Finally, an hour before the sun came up, this one over here, 3 times, very deep. Went on for 30 seconds, pause, 30 seconds, pause, 30 seconds. I stand up and go, is that all you got? Get up here on the road, we want to see you. Get up here. And then about 10 seconds after that, we all heard this. And then we heard it walk down the mountain and go away. Like, I can't do anything with these guys. I'm not afraid now. And if I would have known then what I know now, what I would have done is walk back down, grab the camera out of the backpack and said, shh, Daddy's going to go take some pictures of Sasquatch. That's what I would have done. But I didn't. And so I'm here. Thank you for your time.
That was awesome. All right, that was great. This thing was, oh, I turned it off.